I will start off by introducing myself, but first of all, thank you all for joining our roadmap today. My name is Emily Crouch. I am the Customer Marketing Manager here at CoreView. First of all, I will kick it off by just going through some housekeeping rules. So if any of you do experience any technical difficulties, please just use the chat function, ping me a message, and I will try my best to rectify the issue for you. This is being recorded and you will be sent the recording after the webinar. If one of your colleagues couldn't make it, feel free to forward them the email so they can watch the session or you can go over to reference the session. At the end, there will be a live Q&A. So I really suggest that as we're going through today's webinar, if you do have any questions, please use either the chat or the question box to answer any question. No question is a silly question. And then at the end, our hosts and our speakers will answer those questions for you in real time. So yeah, please don't hesitate to answer as many questions. So now I'm going to hand it over to Dan, our VP of Product, and he's going to walk us through the agenda.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so today we're going to go through our recent releases. We are releasing product at a fast and furious pace, really every 2 weeks, substantial enhancements to the product. I live it all day, every day, but I never expect that everybody keeps pace and understands the latest. So we always like the opportunity to kind of reflect and make sure you understand some of the recent enhancements that we've delivered. We'll have Roy Martinez, our technical evangelist, do a demo of some of these new features that we've delivered. And then we'll talk a little bit about the roadmap and what's coming up in the next quarter. What are some of the things that you can expect in the next quarter and beyond? And then we'll have time for Q&A. One thing I do want to address is that for today's webinar, we are speaking about the CoreView product. Over time, we'll be bringing together our CoreView and Simian Cloud roadmap conversations so that as more of you are looking at that product, are looking at both products, you're going to want one place to turn and hear the latest news. But for today, we're still going to focus exclusively on the CoreView product. So with that said, let's jump in and take a look at some of our recent releases. As I'm sure all of you have experienced, we have launched the new Governance Center. The Governance Center, not only did it bring together our playbook dashboards and our health check into a single place, but it also brought together our homepage so that it is now the new homepage for all users. And this is part of our approach in saying that, the intent of CoreView is to identify and resolve problems. And so by making the Governance Center your home, and a personalized home where you see the information that's appropriate to you as a user, again, the focus is on what are the problems that you're trying to resolve and giving you a very quick view into those. But with this new homepage being available for all users, we understand that with delegated administrators, they may not have access to everything in the application. And so even for those people with minimum permissions, we wanted to make sure that the homepage was still meaningful to them. So we have the Getting Started widget, which helps you with onboarding new delegated admins and new operators so that they can understand how to use the application, how to navigate, and have access to kind of some of that key documentation and training. We have the most common reports. And again, this becomes personalized over time. So initially we present it to the users based on the most common reports that are being used across our customer base. And then from there within the customer. And then from there, it learns over time so that as a user, if a user constantly is going in and looking at, for example, the license pool center, that will move up to be the top report so that the ones that those users are using all the time will migrate onto that report, onto that top reports list to make it really easy for them to get to where they commonly need to go. And then also the most popular management actions. So it shows the most common management actions that people are performing in the application. So again, to accelerate the time to get to task done. I am going to pause for one moment and shut down my Teams. So hold on one moment.
Just a reminder, if anyone does have any questions, Dan will be happy to answer them. So feel free to pop them in the chat or use the question function.
All right, hoping I got that out of the way. So sorry about that. The other thing, oops, with the new governance center, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. The new governance center is the ability to personalize the governance center. So there's a couple of capabilities within the governance center. So first of all, you can control the tab order so that if there are playbooks that are more important to you than others or ones that you're looking at more frequently, you can move them over to the left. You can pin them so that they're always available even as you're scrolling left to right across the tabs if you have a large number of tabs, and so that those tabs will always be visible and available to you and in the order that you want to see them. And then also within the pages themselves, within each one of the tabs, you have the ability to show and hide widgets so that if there are particular widgets that you are more or less interested in, you can have the ability to hide them, as well as the ability to drag and drop and arrange widgets into a view of your preference. So again, you can really personalize the governance center. This is personalized, so it is each individual can have their own configuration and preferred view in order to get the work done that you want to get done. This was also supported by the rollout of new playbook roles. So as we launched playbooks and we got a lot of feedback from customers on their usage, we wanted to have different types of roles that were available so that in addition to the tenant admin who can set up playbooks, we wanted to have these different roles for a playbook admin, a playbook manager, and a playbook viewer. So the playbook viewer has the ability to kind of see all of the information on the playbook, but no ability to, for example, take action, execute workflow or remediation. They're just there to be able to see the dashboards and understand the information at play. The playbook admin can create playbooks, and in particular, this is really helpful if you want to, in an organization, a large organization where you want to have maybe different playbooks for different departments or what have you, that you can set up the different, you can have playbook admins that set up playbooks that are specific to their virtual tenant, and the playbook manager is more of that operator that can see the playbooks. They can perform remediation, but they're not able to configure new playbooks or anything like that. So these different roles in order for you to really leverage it and delegate responsibility out for playbooks out to your organization. One of the other things we did is around workflow. We wanted the ability for you to be able to capture the time savings associated with automation. And so what we saw is a lot of organizations doing this already outside the system in spreadsheets and such. And so what we wanted was the ability for you to go in, to be able to set manually the amount of time it takes to perform certain tasks manually, and then to be able to track how much time it takes as a result of them being automated. So you could say something like onboarding used to take 30 to 40 minutes of work. Now it's a matter of going in and setting up, entering a few pieces of key information. So maybe it was 30 minutes before, it's 4 minutes now, and then you multiply that by how many times you run the onboarding. You can look at that as overall workflow time savings. So we knew this is important for a lot of organizations to be able to show back to their leadership the time saved with automation, and so we wanted to make that really easy for you. Some of the other things we did for workflow is around data transformations. So what does this mean? What this means is that during a workflow, there are times where you need the ability to, in this case, strip out special characters or remove spaces. So what's the most common example of this is if you are creating a UPN and you're creating it, let's say, based on the first and last name of a person. And let's say the last name is Munez, and it has a the tilde over the N, and you need to strip that out in order to have a UPN that's just first name dot last name, and can't have the the N with the accent over it. So what this does is using by setting a data transformation in the step, it'll take that input, it'll remove the special characters, replace them with the base character, remove spaces, and that way you can fully automate something like creating the UPN without worry about having to clean or scrub the data input ahead of time. People can put in the name as it should probably be properly be spelled with correct accents and such, but it can remove those in the process of creating other data elements that don't support those. One of the things I'm most excited about, I know that Roy is going to demonstrate for us, is around workflow and if-else branching. So what we've done is we've extended the filter capability of the system to support if-else. So that what you can do now is you can run a condition. You can say, I have a conditional step here. In this case of this example, is the office location Milan? If yes, perform this set of actions. If no, perform this other set of actions, and then it will resume with the common set of actions below that. So this provides a lot of power and flexibility to be able to set up different conditional branching workflows, and just a lot of power in the workflow engine in general. This has long been requested by customers that leverage our workflow, and I think this is going to be a huge advancement in how easy it is to set up really complex workflows, but in a way that doesn't feel complex. We also enhanced the risky users report to support the creation of playbooks, so that now if you want to create a playbook based on a user having a policy based on a user being identified at a certain risk level, based on our conversations, there wasn't necessarily a standard set of actions that people performed for us to deliver an out-of-the-box playbook. So we wanted to enable the ability for you to create your own custom policy, whether that's just simply investigating the situation and understanding why the risk level is high, suspending the account, whatever you feel is the appropriate behavior. We wanted the ability for you to at least be able to create those custom policies for yourself and trigger those actions whenever a risky user is identified by Microsoft. We've also launched multi-tenant configuration capabilities starting with playbooks. So what does this mean? If you're an organization that has multiple tenants, you haven't consolidated down to a single Microsoft 365 tenant. You've got different maybe departments, maybe business units, maybe companies that you've acquired. You're managing multiple tenants using CoreView, but you want consistency in applying policies and applying how you manage your tenants across these different tenants. With multi-tenant configuration, we have the ability for you to build your playbooks once and then populate them across all of your tenants. So that way you have consistency, and that way if you change a policy in the master tenant, you can then cascade that change down to the other tenants, so that again you have that consistency across all of your tenants in how you're managing your playbooks and how you're managing your M365 governance. With license pools, the big enhancement that we had is supporting the reporting only view with the new license pools. So the launch of the new license pool view was done a few months back, but it was only for non-reporting only views. And so we made sure that we finally caught up with those users who are using license pools only for reporting, and provides that really nice flexibility to be able to essentially create a pivot table of grouping by view, grouping by pool or grouping by license, so that you can understand the distribution of licenses across your organization. We also responded to several customers that were looking for the ability to create policies and schedule reports from the subscription center. So this capability has been extended so that now you can schedule reports for active subscriptions or for subscription history, and have those sent out on a scheduled basis. We didn't have this capability in the new user experience because we didn't support scheduled reports for anything where there is client-side logic. So this was something that required some change to how we do scheduled reports, but it's now available. And the last thing I wanted to speak to on enhancements that we've done recently, and this is something that's actually going out in the next week or so. So I say, so if anybody's been diligent about watching the release notes and saying, hey, I never saw this, you're right, it's about imminent to be dropped, is integration from the CoreView audit logs into Sentinel. And so what we will provide the ability to do is for you to have an Azure Event Hub in your Azure instance, where we will publish the CoreView audit logs out to the Event Hub. And then from the Event Hub, you can populate them into any number of different targets, Sentinel being the most common thing that we've heard requested. But for that matter, you could set them into a database, you could write them to a log, any number of different capabilities once we've sent them to an Azure Event Hub. So if you're not familiar with Azure Event Hubs, I would say, that's but you're interested in this integration, it's something for you to look at. It's a standard ability, capability within Azure, a standard service, so that, again, if you need all of your logs in one place, including the CoreView logs, that's how we will support this as we go forward. All right, so with that, I am going to turn it over to Roy and let him take over and do a demo.
Outstanding. Thanks, Dan. Much appreciated. So let me just pick the right screen here and find my way. So hopefully everyone can now see this lovely governance center. So yeah, Dan talked us through quite a few different amazing enhancements. I'm just going to tackle a couple of the kind of whiz-bang ones that I think are super, super cool. Starting with that customization in the governance center. So here we are in our governance center. I've got a handful of the out-of-the-box playbooks ready to be viewed. I can kind of track through them. But you'll notice this little customize button up here. If I click into there, I get a couple of new options here. So I can manage this tab. And here I can select, first of all, which playbooks do I want to see? Now, I might have tons of different ones from tons of different use cases, as you can see here. But yeah, I can pin the ones that I want to be able to see on my governance center. And I can even move to show, you know what, I want to see users up front, and I want license management to be a little bit later because I'm more interested in security than I am other things, right? So I might change the orders here, click apply, and we'll see those orders change in real time. The other cool thing, aside from managing that top tab navigation, is actually managing the view itself of the playbook. So if you can see here, I've got a little bit of a convention I like to go by. I want to see my ROI stats up top. I want to see my compliance and summary, and I want to see my top 3 policies across the board for all these things. But that new users playbook I added is kind of the default view. So I'm going to jump into this show hide widgets area. And while I'm in this edit view, certainly I can move things around. So for instance, I can move my historical time savings up. I can change my potential time savings to be up top. I can move around my compliance so that it conforms to that convention that I've grown accustomed to. And I can even grab my top 3 policies and kind of move that guy where I want him to be as well. And once I got that in place, I can actually just get rid of the things that I don't care to necessarily see. Now, this might obviously change to personal taste, but that's the idea. So now when I apply, well, I've got a view that's consistent across the board and represents the things that I particularly care about for my specific experience. Once done, I can either discard or save those changes. And now those changes are representative when Roy is logged in. If Adam or Jack or Jill comes in and logs into the same console, they will have a very different experience per their customization. So this is a really cool way to kind of personalize your governance center so that you're seeing the information that you care about in the way that you care about across the board here. So moving on, I want to highlight that the actual playbooks that I have the capability to customize is dictated by those roles that Dan alluded to earlier. So let's take a look at my operator here. And I'm Roy. If I jump into my operator view, we'll see that I have a couple of new roles here. So I've got this global viewer role, and this global viewer role allows me to see whatever playbooks have been designated or delegated to me in my permission set. So for instance, if I'm a frontline help desk and I've been given visibility, or maybe I'm in some executive role and I want visibility of the playbooks, but I don't necessarily need to be editing, configuring, or setting them up, the viewer role will give me that access. Over here on the manager role, this is where I'll be everything that the viewer role gives me, but additionally, I can now execute remediations for those policies ad hoc. And then of course, admin means I'm able to configure new ones, remediate them as needed, and see everything as they've been delegated to me via a permission set. So, pardon me. So that's just a way, pardon me, to granularize how operators are able to interface with these playbooks, how they view them, how they manage them, how they administrate them. So moving along, let's talk a little bit about workflows. I'm just going to go into my workflow view here, and I'm going to filter this view to a particular couple of workflows. So I've got these offboarding workflows, and I have executed them a few times, and I know that they're doing so much better, but I don't have any real metric because they're not tied to a playbook. They're just something that I use independently. To Dan's point earlier, we've added some ROI options here. So here I've got a time of automated process in minutes and a time of manual process in minutes, which I've gone ahead and updated. So normally this offboarding situation takes at least 45 minutes of manual effort to get those objects created, to get those things offboarded, or whatever the case may be in the workflow. But with my automation, I'm at a much better return on investment in terms of the time it takes for that automated process to work. So now I have a way to view that information right from within the workflows view. And down the line, I'm sure that we'll have dedicated reports that will allow us to kind of surface this information in a much cleaner format. But yeah, now I can kind of jump into my workflow view and see in a second and assign those values so I can identify in no time at all exactly what is my current return on investment here. So that's a really great one. If we jump back to workflows here, let's just take one more look at a different one. And first click the right button. So back in workflows here, if I want to view, let's just say I'm looking at onboarding this time. So here in this onboarding workflow, I've got quite a few different steps that occur, and that's great. But I just want to highlight that branching logic that we talked about earlier. So whenever I create the cloud user, there might be specific situations where I need to have multiple options available to me. The location thing is one example, but it could be anything, right? So let's say that I only assign a particular license when a particular variable or attribute is X, right? So I might use an action to retrieve some particular value from the user that was created. And then here you'll see this add condition if else. That means I can now create a condition based on some value, let's say on domain, just as an example. If domain equals to, I don't know, CoreView.com, that's my logic filter. And now I have a yes or no branch. So on the yes, maybe I'll take steps X, Y, Z for if the domain is CoreView.com, but if the domain isn't CoreView.com, I might take a separate set of actions. So these operate just like any other. I can add whatever category, whatever action I need. It just gives me a way to contain an if-else subroutine within the context of a larger workflow. Now, workflow design as a concept is a whole other topic we could talk at length about, So, there are cases to be made whether how complex you need your workflows to get, but the options are there for you to aid in your use cases as you see fit. So there we go. The last thing I want to touch on is the notion of the multi-tenant management. So here in the hub, as we'll call it, if I show you here, I'm at, rather than app.coreview.com, I've gone to hub.coreview.com, and now I can see some of the multi-tenant capabilities that are available for CoreView. First and foremost, this getting started section gives me some jumping off points to jump into. I can configure playbook policies, create new configuration templates, onboard new customer tenant, etc. Now, what does all that mean? Basically, here I have the tenants view. These are all the different tenants that I manage at my company. Now, here in CoreView, obviously, I've got tons of test stuff, but you may have a test tenant, a stage tenant, a production tenant, or if you're working on behalf of, in an MSP context, maybe you have different customer tenants that you're managing, whatever the case may be. Here we can see those tenants, what subscription level they're set to, how many CoreView licenses are used for each of those tenants, and if there are configuration templates assigned to them, which ones they are. Now, what are configuration templates? Templates are a way for us to pre-package playbooks and policies to be applied in bulk across multiple tenants. So as you can see here, I've got a handful of policies, and I could go in and edit any one of these guys, just to give you a view. Now, what policies does this configuration consist of? And then a column that shows which playbooks those policies are part of. So you can kind of mix and match there. And then which tenants am I applying them to? After a quick summary, which should look similar to what we do in our permissions and virtual tenant setup, once we know, hey, this is the name of this configuration, these are the playbooks and or policies that are contained in that configuration, these are the tenants that I'm going to apply those configurations to. When I submit that, in one fell swoop, all is well in the world, and my tenants will be updated to show those updated configuration tenants. So again, it's just a way for us to kind of baseline the way that our policies and playbooks are applied to multiple endpoints. The last bit of the puzzle here is the operators view, where I can see exactly which operators have access to this hub and in what capacity and what their current status is. So as we can see, Carmine here is an admin and a viewer. That means I could have him admin and create this stuff, or he could be a viewer and just come in and be able to see what these configurations are. So again, multi-tenant management in the hub is a really cool new aspect of the CoreView platform that I think really levels up the ability to design and predefine baselines that can then be applied across the board to additional tenants, customer tenants, whatever the case may be. So I think that's about it for me, just to give you a quick look at some of the hottest new releases from the team, and I will pass it back over to you.
All right, perfect.
Does anyone have any questions for Dan or Roy?
Hold on one moment.
If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box or the question function.
All right, are you seeing my screen, and are you all seeing me catch up with the right slide? Sorry about that. I had it all queued up, but it went blank for me. So, all right, let's talk about what's next. There's a lot coming next. You might have said, geez, all of that stuff you just talked about, that was the last quarter. Yes, it was. And we've got a lot more coming. So when we talk about, as we start working on new enhancements, one thing I want people to understand is that as we go forward, what we're trying to do is we're always trying to work backwards from playbooks. Our approach to everything now is, how can we help you find and remediate problems? So anytime we're looking at a new capability in the system, I think we used to come at it from the approach of, well, let's do a report first, and then we'll do actions later and workflow later and playbooks later. And now we're saying, what playbooks do we want to provide? And therefore, what workflow and actions do we need to provide, and therefore what reports do we need to provide. So it's just a mindset approach to how we approach it. So we did launch, actually, I didn't even put it on the list of things that we launched in the last quarter. We launched a Copilot playbook. With the ability to understand whether playbook licenses are being used, and the ability to optimize your Copilot licenses. And we're going to continue to work on our support of Copilot and helping you with Copilot readiness, understanding whether your sharing settings are correct. That's what's really critical and the thing that has people most scared about Copilot. They're excited about the possibility, but one of the things we say internally is that Copilot is the death of security by obscurity. So one of the most important things for you to roll out Copilot is to have confidence that your sharing settings around OneDrive and SharePoint are correct, so that the right users have access to the right files and information, so that so that you won't have those types of things where inappropriate users are getting access to either incorrect or old or invalid data, or data they shouldn't get access to just because they know how to ask Copilot the right question. Copilot doesn't, variate between whether something should or shouldn't be shared, other than through the settings. And so if the settings aren't right, then the data gets exposed. So that's our focus around Copilot, is helping you tighten up the sharing settings, and helping you identify where you might have problems so that you feel confident in rolling out Copilot. We're going to be supporting Power Apps and providing the ability to understand how are Power Apps licenses being used, are Power Apps themselves being used by the right people, is the right sort of labels around data sensitivity being captured so that you understand when Power Apps are using or capturing sensitive data. And just generally making sure that you don't suffer the same thing that a lot of people suffered with Teams, which is app sprawl. It's really easy to go in and start to create apps, but if nobody's cleaning up after themselves, especially when apps are not being used, basically you're driving up your Azure consumption, and you've got all of this clutter that could end up being confusing and exposing information that you don't want. So we'll be focusing on Power Apps. With SharePoint, we'll be doing more around understanding SharePoint settings and configuration, and making sure that you can tighten up who has access to SharePoint and better delegated administration of SharePoint. But the other major thing that we'll be doing is diving into the file level detail of SharePoint and being able to understand and analyze permissions, storage, and things like that, so you can get a better handle on your SharePoint. With Intune, we're looking at more capabilities around managing Intune policies, as well as managing Intune apps. And so that's going to be a big area of focus for us. With Teams Phone, we continue to deliver further enhancements around Teams Phone capabilities, whether it's managing voice and voicemail settings, whether it's being able to control holidays. We're looking at things like Teams devices, so providing more capabilities around Teams Phone, and then deepening our capabilities around Entra ID. So we've begun work on supporting dynamic groups, not just reporting on them, but providing the ability to manage and edit them. And we'll also be doing the same with things like conditional access policies as well. So a lot there. I mean, just some simple screenshots with Power Apps showing that we're going to be diving in and providing you more insight as to what apps are being used, who has access to them, what licenses are needed, and just giving you greater insight. With SharePoint and Copilot, helping you to be able to understand, is your security right? What's your potential risk of exposure of inappropriate data across the organization? With Teams Voice, it's continuing to deepen the functionality, but also providing more flexibility around how numbers are being distributed in order to be managed. The idea of virtual tenants or number pools is really critical, because a lot of organizations, we're finding that organizations have very different needs. In some cases, they have really clean delineation of which which administrators are responsible for which pools. So for example, in an international organization, it's clear France manages the France numbers. That's really simple. In other organizations, it's really much more challenging. They've purchased numbers over time. They're not sequential. They all have the same prefix. And so having a lot of flexibility on how to manage the numbers is critical as well. Like I said, with Intune, deepening around understanding device compliance, whether it's compliance with policy, and understanding whether or not the apps on the device are appropriate, and also integrating devices into the onboarding and offboarding process as well, so that as if you are offboarding an employee, that considers the device that they may have been given as part of their service at your organization. And with dynamic groups, we'll be rolling this out in phases. We've already launched the ability to see the definition of groups in the groups reports for dynamic groups. And so we'll be providing you the ability to edit those definitions. But again, that'll be iteratively. We'll give you both the ability to edit it in what I would say in script mode, and that'll be sort of the first thing, so that if the script is generated automatically by Microsoft, and we see that, in this example here, user country equals Italy, and you want to copy paste that and replace Italy with France, super simple, right? You can go in, you can manipulate the script. But more complex scripts, we're going to have our own query builder, so that you can build more complex scripts and maintain them more easily through the user interface. And many of you have also seen the work that we've done around Midnight Blizzard and the free tool that we developed in order to help you understand, risks associated with different apps in your tenant, and those that may have frankly more permissions than they should, and that they should be needed. And so we're going to be pulling that capability into the application, so that you can understand which apps have which permissions, whether those apps are being used, and give you the ability to more thoroughly manage the third-party apps that are being allowed through Entra ID. The other thing that we're going to be doing is around more multi-tenant, more best practices, and more extensibility. So just as you saw with the multi-tenant configuration, we're going to be supporting more multi-tenant alert dashboards as well, so that if you're an organization that is using playbooks across multiple tenants, that you can aggregate those all down into a single dashboard to understand more or less, where do I have to do my work today? Where are my problem areas? Where do I have to dive in and spend my time? But we're also going to be supporting a very, what I would say, API first approach, where we provide more capabilities through a public API, so that you can leverage the tools of your choice, so that, whether it's tying it into a help desk system, maybe you're still using something like SailPoint in part of your organizations. Maybe you want to integrate directly from something like Workday into CoreView. We'll provide that ability to do more via integration and use CoreView more as the engine. If you're looking to be able to leverage the power of CoreView, but you still want people to be able to use the tools that they're more familiar with. And then more out-of-the-box workflows for things like onboarding and offboarding to make it easier for organizations to get started. So with that, I've tried to leave us some time for Q&A. So Emily, if I see that there have been some blinking questions that have come in over the course of the presentation, is there any questions that we can answer?
Sure, let me just read them out. I have well over 100 locations. Doing it this way is way too complex. Any workflow with more than 12 steps is reaching incomprehensible.
Yeah, I think that's probably in relation to the branching logic. I kind of alluded to, or at least I made a statement that somewhat alluded to it, but yeah, I mean, workflow design 101 is kind of another topic that we could really delve into. I 100% agree with that, by the way. I mean, you really don't want to overcomplicate your workflow. It at some point starts to get diminishing returns. But you know, as always, we urge you to kind of work with your customer success team to find the right solution. There are a handful of different you know, operations and things that we can use within the tool, things like custom lists, things like branching logic, things like nested workflows to help to declutter those very, very complex workflow scenarios. But yeah, I just urge you to reach out to your customer success team to see what kind of options you have to you know, find the right solution for that. But definitely agree, a workflow that's too complex kind of defeats the point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Roy. I mean, you know, it's really easy. Well, I said quote unquote easy. It's really easy to build the, you know, the most superb, complex, multi-step branching conditional workflow in Visio, and it looks awesome, and everything's all in one place. But when you go to put that in a system, it's actually, the more you have one super workflow instead of things like branches, nested workflows, you know, different workflows for different use cases, actually the more brittle it is, the more likely it is to break. And when it breaks, you go, where in this vast panorama of this super complex workflow did it break? So I'm actually a huge advocate of, yes, design your workflows in Visio or Miro or your, you know, tool of choice for design. But when you go to implement in pieces, leverage nested workflows, leverage the idea that, hey, you know, instead of having every, you know, one branch for every use case, great, create those as different workflows instead of one workflow with 800 branches. So yeah, I'm with you that the difference between the way you visualize it and the way you implement it, I think is critical for success.
Great, thank you. The next question is there a projected release date for the Server 2022 migration?
Yeah, we're in final testing right now. I would say that we are, you know, probably less than weeks away from that being available.
Great. The next question is, for the applications listed under what's next, what platforms will be additional modules that need to be purchased to have access to that data?
So yeah, so we have varied our licensing in 2023. So we've got, you know, whole new set of licenses. We've got legacy licenses. So it's hard for me to speak to, and I actually deliberately didn't speak to which features are associated with which SKU going forward, because there's a combination of new SKUs and legacy SKUs. I would say the best thing to do is to speak to your customer success manager if there's something in particular that you are interested in order to understand whether that's you know, available based on your current license, or whether that's something that would be, you know, an upsell or a new, you know, a new offering. So yeah, I very generic, very intentionally presented them as generic today, and I'd say, yeah, if you're interested, please follow up with your CSM.
Perfect, thank you. The next one is it possible to use in a workflow to check if a user is a member of a specific group?
That's an interesting one. So the answer is dependent on several factors. I think the easy answer is that can you determine from an intra ID object some level of attribute that defines what group a user is a member of? I don't know that's the case, so maybe it's not a simple answer, but I'm willing to bet there's some way to finagle our way to an answer, whether it's directly from retrieving some piece of information from the object, or doing some kind of gymnastics behind the scenes to get to that end result through reporting and that. Yeah, that's a hard one to answer, but maybe again, if you want to ping that question over to your CX team, and I myself might get involved to help find the answer to that one. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, a lot of that, you know, what immediately jumps to my mind on the answer to that is that we've seen a lot of organizations that are starting to leverage playbooks as a means of doing that, so that instead of saying, oh, at step 3, we're going to try to determine whether the user is a member of this group, that's actually the definition of the playbook that says, you know, are they a member of this group? And if so, therefore go execute this workflow. So that becomes input rather than something that's kind of calculated midstream. So, but again, whether or not that's appropriate for the use case that you're considering, you know, we'll see. But I think, like Roy said, there are often answers. They're probably just perhaps not the way you originally thought to accomplish it.
Cool. And the last one is more of a statement than a question, but someone has said that they would love to see CoreView also manage non-Microsoft tools because they need security and governance too.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can only be so good at so many things at once. Okay, you know, arrogance aside, I mean, we very, you know, you see in the little corner of the screen there, built by M365 experts for M365 experts. That is our bread and butter. That's what we live all day, every day. And so where we see ourselves going is providing the ability to be extensible so that we can speak to third-party applications, we can interact with third-party applications. But I think we got our hands full just with Microsoft alone before we start trying to take on managing other applications to the same extent that we do with Microsoft 365.
We've got another question in just now, guys, keep them coming. The next one is the dynamic distribution group creation feature live right now?
No, so let's separate for a minute dynamic groups and dynamic distribution lists, because under the covers, even though they are often, even though dynamic distribution lists are often referred to as dynamic groups or distribution groups, they are a different object in a different, let's call it workload, right? Dynamic groups, M365, security groups, Teams groups, those exist in Entra ID. Dynamic distribution lists, those exist in Exchange. And so the first wave of what we are doing relates to dynamic groups, M365, security, and Teams groups. It will be a separate effort for us to support dynamic distribution lists. It is our intention to do that as part of the roadmap, but it is going to be further down the road because it's not the case where we can build once and reuse. We will basically have to re-implement the logic, and we'll have to deal with the challenges and limitations of Exchange APIs in order to be able to provide as much of the same functionality as we can. So the ability to manage, the ability to see reports on dynamic groups is live now. Dynamic distribution lists will come later.
Great, thank you. I've just popped a message in the chat for anyone to submit their final questions. Cool, we've got one more. Will you provide a way to report on occupancy on Teams rooms, Teams room resources?
We are doing a lot on Teams Voice right now. I can't say that particular enhancement we've heard from customers. Again, we're leveraging a combination of talking with customers who are using Teams Voice. We're listening to Teams Voice. We listen to the enhancement suggestions submitted to Core Voice as a great source of input. But that particular one is not one that has come up previously. So it's not to say no, but it's I would say of the things that we have planned in the immediate future. It's not one that we have planned in the immediate future. So again, I would encourage you, I would always encourage you, please, we love seeing your ideas get submitted in CoreVoice. We love to see people voting on ideas in CoreVoice. So I'll give a plug to that. Please, if you've got ideas, if you heard something that excites you, but you want to make sure we're focusing on it, go in, look around Teams, go into CoreVoice, look around, vote on the things that helps us. It also gives us a great way of knowing who cares, so that we can circle back with you and ask questions. So again, your CSMs are fantastic for kind of channeling your feedback to us. CoreVoice is also great because then we can kind of reach out to you directly.
Cool. We've got a question from the same person asking about Power BI integration.
So that could mean any number of things.
Yeah, I was about to say, what do we mean by integration in that capacity?
So if we're talking about export to be able to do like custom reporting in Power BI, that's supported using the data connector module, which is available as part of the suite offering, to be able to export data and then be able to create your own reports, match it up with your own data. If we're talking about like Power BI usage reporting in order to be able to optimize Power BI licensing, that is something we'd love to do, but unfortunately the APIs for us to retrieve that information don't exist yet. We have given that feedback to Microsoft many times, and we actively monitor their roadmap to understand when we'll be able to do that. So it depends on what you mean, but
Yeah, there was a follow-up to the question. I think specifically the example he gave was like identifying which BI workspace a user is a member of, for instance. So it's kind of like usage and analytics of BI. So I think your API statement probably follows suit there.
Yeah, I mean, as we're going into the Power Platform and supporting Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, I mean, that'll definitely be part of our focus as we go forward. We're starting with Power Apps because we feel like that's the most underserved and area right now for being able to have an effective governance program. But we'll also be, touching on Power Automate and Power BI as well in that area.
Great. And the final question is there any plan to integrate Intune Lapse password management?
We don't have a specific plan or timeline for that now. Again, we're doing a lot of work on Intune. And so, again, I know I probably know exactly which customer has asked that question because I know that they've submitted a CoreVoice for it. But if you're not the one that submitted the CoreVoice, there's a CoreVoice for that. Go vote on it. Helps us. But yeah, we don't have that specifically targeted in the next quarter. But like I said, we're doing a lot of work with Intune. We're trying to deepen our support there. And so I think, whether we do it in the next quarter or not, it's a matter of time before we address that need.
And just a comment, right? So to track back to that other question about, supporting applications beyond Microsoft 365 into like the SaaS management. See, this is the reason why, right? This is why we focus on 365, because the reality is 365 converges so many different workloads and so many different service packages that it can be challenging for us to kind of maintain what's the most important thing to hit. So I think it's just interesting to see how that kind of all blended together there. But yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Roy and Dan, for presenting today. And thank you for everyone for joining us. We've really enjoyed the amount of questions today. As Dan said, you can always submit any ideas that you have to CoreVoice. We are going to be having a fun competition in May. So in May, you guys will get sent the newsletter and there will be a workflow competition. So from now, you can start thinking of new workflow ideas to submit, and there will be a competition for that in May. But as always, if you do have any feedback for us here at CoreView, then feel free to leave a review on G2 or Gartner. But I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all very much. If you do have any questions that you want to ask, that you think of after the webinar, please feel free to drop us an email and we will always get back to you. But yeah, thank you so much, Dan and Roy, and see you guys at the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Right. Take care.